Welcome back to the discussion. We're diving into a very provocative piece about Europe gearing up its narrative for war with Russia.
Absolutely. It's like a deep dive that explores how European rhetoric is leading us down a very concerning path.
Right, and the piece centers around Patrick Bob's insights. He's a German journalist who's been on the front line, reporting from both sides in Ukraine. He argues that European leadership has, well, painted themselves into a corner.
Exactly. It really makes you ask, how did we get to the point where war seems like the only option?
Yeah, and it's almost like they're crafting a narrative that primes the public for a conflict they might not have expected.
Yeah.
I mean, a narrative crafted so carefully that it keeps the idea of war dormant until it's too late to reverse course.
And interestingly, the video is hosted on Glenn Deason's channel. Now, Glenn's background in Russian international affairs gives the discussion a certain gravitas, wouldn't you say?
Exactly. His academic expertise, especially on geoeconomics and the Greater Eurasia Initiative, really helps frame the conversation in a broader geopolitical context.
Right.
It's like he's saying, look, these decisions have far reaching implications beyond mere political posturing.
Speaking of implications, I find the idea that European leaders are seen as having boxed themselves in to be especially alarming. Isn't it strange how a series of missteps can lead to such a drastic outcome?
Absolutely. It's like they've built a fortress of policy choices, and now there's no room for diplomatic maneuvering. In a way, it's almost as if every diplomatic move carries the weight of potential escalation.
But let's pause on that analogy. Aren't there counterpoints where some might argue that, well, these measures are simply defensive?
That's a good point. But what Bob seems to argue is that this defensive posture has an offensive undertone.
Right.
Essentially, by exaggerating threats, they inadvertently push their own agenda of mobilizing for a war that might not be inevitable.
So, it's a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy? You build up fear, and then the reaction is to prepare for the very conflict you expect to happen?
Exactly. It's like if you're always expecting the storm, you might build a shelter that ends up isolating
Yeah.
you further. And in doing so, you establish a narrative that war or extensive military measures are the only path forward.
And it also seems to connect with broader themes in international relations. When you, for instance, consider how media can shape public opinion in times of heightened tension.
Indeed, media plays a huge role. The content here is designed to stir up feelings and set up expectations. It really blurs the line between reporting facts and, well, over-dramatizing geopolitical tensions.
Some might even say that this kind of reporting is a bit too sensational for its own good.
I can see that, but you have to appreciate that it brings long-hidden dilemmas into public view.
Right.
For example, if European leaders feel cornered, it begs the question, are we gearing up for a confrontation because we must, or because we're being manipulated into thinking it's the only option?
That's a tricky balance. And while the narrative seems convincing, I wonder if some points may be a tad overblown. What do you think, strictly from a critical standpoint?
Well, there is a risk of exaggeration when you continuously emphasize inevitable conflict. I'd argue that while the buildup of such rhetoric is concerning, it's important to see if actual moves in policy or defense are matching this narrative.
Exactly. It's like, yeah, talk is cheap unless it translates into tangible changes or military mobilizations.
Right. And here's where this discussion really hits a nerve, the potential for unintended escalation.
Indeed.
If leaders continue on this course, it risks creating a self-reinforcing cycle where every defensive move is interpreted as aggressive by the other side.
That's a classic road to miscalculation, isn't it? One misinterpreted signal and you're, well, on the brink of something monumental.
Absolutely, and that's why understanding the nuance here is so critical.
Yeah.
It's a fine line between genuine preparedness and a trap set by our own perceptions and, well, policies.
And it's not just about numbers or policies. It's also about, how the information is presented to the public. The narrative can be as powerful as any physical barrier or weapon.
Exactly. It's like, if you think about it, storytelling is a tool of statecraft. In this case, the story being told is one of unavoidable confrontation, and that can shape everything from public morale to actual military decisions.
There's a curious irony here. In trying to prepare the public for conflict, you might end up narrowing the options for peace.
Definitely, it's almost like a self-imposed dilemma. Once the narrative of war is fully established, any peaceful alternatives get overshadowed. It's a bit like locking
Right.
yourself in a room and then expecting someone outside to help you realize there's a window open.
That's a vivid analogy, and it really captures the urgency of re-evaluating these choices.
And interestingly, the video also touches on how these narratives are not only political, but also economically charged. There's this added layer where, by preparing for war, economic policies and funding shift massively towards defense.
Yes, that economic shift can further entrench the idea that conflict is inevitable. It feeds back into the narrative by, say, bolstering military industries.
Exactly, it's kind of circular, isn't it? Once the system starts to revolve around a military mindset, it's difficult to break free without major systemic changes. And that's what's at risk here. Societal resources being diverted from constructive endeavors to, well, always being in a state of vigilance or pre war posturing.
It makes you wonder whether there could be an alternative way to engage, maybe through stronger diplomatic channels, before such narratives become the norm.
Exactly, and that's where the critique intensifies. We need to question whether these leaders are really choosing the best path or are trapped by the momentum of their own rhetoric. And
Yeah.
I'd argue that a balanced approach could mitigate the extremes in public sentiment.
But, and here's where I respectfully challenge your point, isn't it possible that some of these measures are necessary given the current geopolitical climate? There's a perspective that asserts preparing for war might indeed be the only safeguard against potential aggression.
That's a fair challenge. I mean, one could argue that in uncertain times, a stronger defensive stance is justified. However, the concern is that if these measures spiral, they might become a self-fulfilling prophecy. The key is maintaining a balance.
That's true, but I worry that too often, compromise gets lost in the process. Once leaders start thinking in binary, war or no war, the shades of gray, like diplomacy and negotiation, might fade away.
Right, it's like jumping into a thick fog without checking if there's a path to clear skies.
Yeah,
And that's
indeed.
where public awareness and critical discourse become indispensable.
For sure, because when the public is aware and questioning the narrative, it calls for accountability from those in power.
Exactly. It creates a sort of feedback loop where alternative narratives, ones focused on peace and stability, can compete with the war talk. And that competition is essential to avoid irreversible decisions based solely on fear and escalation.
It's fascinating how a single piece of content like what Patrick Barr produced can open the door to such a multifaceted debate about policy, perception, and the future.
Absolutely. It underscores the power of storytelling in shaping not just opinions, but ultimately international outcomes.
Right.
And it reminds us all to always question the narrative before accepting it as destiny.
And to remain vigilant about the balance between necessary defense and reckless escalation.
Exactly. It's a delicate dance, one that demands constant re-examination of both our methods and our messages. The conversation around Europe's preparedness for war with Russia is a clear example of how deeply intertwined politics, media, and public sentiment can be.
It certainly is, and hopefully discussions like this help shed some light on the complexities involved.
Well said. Thanks for joining in as we navigate these challenging topics, staying critical, yet open to understanding the many layers beneath the surface.